All right, Lillian, take it away.
Much. Thank you everyone for joining and yeah, it's great to see everybody virtually and to be connecting us all together here. And I'm really super excited. We definitely have, true to front and center be a statewide coalition. We've got some incredible leaders from across the state, and we are all getting to connect here today. So thank you again. Today's discussion is going to be around community-led solutions to clean and just transportation. I'm Lillian Ballesteros. I use she, her pronouns, and I work with Latino Community Fund. We are a statewide organization. We organize alongside our Latinx communities in the King County area, in Yakima and Tri-Cities. Really investing in local leadership, community-led policy solutions, and advocating for equitable resource distribution. So we are a part of Front and Centered, which is a statewide coalition of communities of color-led organizations that are working on climate justice together through organizing, through advocacy, policy, research, just building community, having food together when we can, right? And, changing policies in our way and making sure that it's community led. I'm really excited. Today's conversation, we've got incredible speakers from across the state and, talking about transportation. We know that the work that we are doing needs to be led by our local communities, by our local leaders. And we know that transportation across the state from a statewide perspective, it's really an important determinant, and it's so closely tied to our health and economic mobility of our communities, to access. And so it's really exciting to have our group of speakers here today to tell their stories. We know that storytelling is so important in our communities, and we need to be telling our stories and making sure they're at that policy level. And to hear from everybody on, we've kind of got this question around, how can transportation be cleaner? How can it be more just from our perspective? And hearing everybody's stories today. So I'm going to introduce everybody, and we'll start with Paul, and we'll have each person introduce themselves. Love to hear where you're calling from, and from your perspective around this question of how can transportation be cleaner, be more just. But also just sharing your story and your perspective today. And again, if you have questions throughout, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll leave time at the end to make sure we get to everybody, to get to some questions. So Paul, would love to hear from you, and nice to see you. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Paul Tabayoyon. I'm a community outreach coordinator here in Yakima County for our local Asian Pacific Islander Coalition chapter. We're a civic organization that engages in social issues, economic issues, those that impact our communities of diversity. And I myself am actually handicapped, born in Seattle, raised in Yakima, graduated from YVC, Perry Technical, and Central Washington with a degree in energy management. Partway through that journey, I found that I had a second back surgery. My first one was a lower back surgery due to an injury that created monoplegia in my left leg. So I was very handicapped for over a year. Had major surgery, recovered, and had a great career for many, many years. But in 2013, I had another injury with a cervical neck fusion, something that some people consider common, but having a second back surgery, I was immediately designated as a state handicapped. This completely took me out of my career. But what it enabled me to do was to empower myself. I took DVR programs to deal with the economic situation that I was in. And that directly led me into public transportation, using it for college every day and to get back and forth from Yakima to Ellensburg. And I really found that it was difficult at times. It had to modify my school schedule. And it actually kept my ability from finding work because of schedules that didn't correspond with employers, and that was the hardest part. So now that I'm back into my career as a community outreach coordinator, I really see the impact of COVID, the economic situation we're in, and how we can reshape our transportation system. My degree was in integrated energy management, which is a systems analyst position. So having already experienced using the system, and now that I can reanalyze it, I want to do my best part to contribute, not only at our local level, but also at the state level, and also give voices to our community through our local APIC programs that will help people speak testimonies to the legislature themselves to help approve these programs and convince them that we need a further evaluation of what our community needs. I'm a rural community. That is a lot different from urban or city, and we have a lot of restrictions, which I believe a lot of people would understand. And if not, please bring those questions forward. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you. That is wonderful to hear, and just so much that you are bringing. We really appreciate your perspective. I want to introduce next Alejandra, and would love to hear about, yeah, some more from you, and again, where you're calling from, and your perspective on this.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alejandra Grillo. I'm the care management team lead at Entre Hermanos. We are based in Seattle, and we serve mostly Latino LGBTQ immigrant community. We don't focus on disabilities, but we have a lot of clients that have disabilities and rely on public transportation to get to and from work, medical services, groceries. And what we have noticed is that the schedules are not the best for them, right? As Paul was mentioning, you have to be on a place at 8 a.m. You have to leave your house around 6 a.m. to make sure to make it on time. Me, myself, I rely on public transportation, and I have done that for the 10 years that I've been living in Seattle. And for example, this morning I had an appointment at 9 a.m. and I had to leave my house at 7:30 to make sure I would be there on time. So we would love to see more, like, better schedules that serve our community, and more routes that cover South King County, because there are not a lot of routes for South King County, and that affects our clients. And also with COVID, you know, like, people are just trying to get a job in whatever they can. But again, due to lack of transportation, or like access to public transportation, sometimes they're not able to do that. And yeah, so I'm happy to be here, and I hope we can create a solution for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. I appreciate Paul and Alejandra already bringing up, you know, specific to communities, to our rural communities, to South King County, where, you know, what does transportation look like for our communities? I'd love to introduce Jaime Torres next, and hear more from your perspective on this.
Hello, everybody. Excuse me. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jaime Torres from Pasco, Washington, also known as Tri-Cities. I'm the founder of Tri-Cities Justice Alliance. I forgot to mention that earlier. We're definitely fighting systemic racism and whatnot in that area. I also have a podcast, Brown Bearded and Disabled, where I've been tracking my progress since I've recently become disabled in 2015. So I'm a newbie, if you will. I did have the speech prepared. I wrote it down, and I can't read it closely because I have double vision. I suffer from double vision, sorry. So, you know, I do have this recurring dream of me running through a forest. You know, it's a rainforest from my childhood, from my Rainier. You know, I can hear everything, and I can hear my feet pounding on the floor, my heart pumping in my chest, you know, and I stopped knowing what that sensation felt like in August of 2015. When I suffered my brain bleed that left me disabled. So I had to leave Oakland, California, which is where I was living, to rehabilitate up here with my friends and family. And it definitely was an eye-opener, you know, because I wasn't born disabled. I was, you know, later disabled in my adult life. So there was a lot of things to get used to. And um, but it definitely changed my perspective because I'm not the only. I wasn't born disabled, like I said. I was I was disabled as an adult, so it changed the way I viewed everything. And it made me realize that there's so much more adversity, especially in like I live in Central Pasco, which is like the older part of my city, and the infrastructure just is crumbling. It's not as great as it should be. I was in the Bay Area, so public transportation down there it was amazing compared to the Tri-Cities. I can't go for walks in my neighborhood because like I said, the sidewalks are crumbling or they're raised to a certain level, and if I'm walking in my walker or using my wheelchair, it almost always throws me off balance. And I just know that we can do better in this state. We can always do better. So thank you everybody for your time.
Thank you so much, Jaime. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, you bring up infrastructure, and I think as we think about policies across the state and what can be done, love to introduce next Abby and hear from you on regarding this and again where you're calling from and hear from you.
Hi everyone, my name is Abby Griffith. I live here in Vancouver, Washington. I am college student. I go to Washington State University. I'm totally blind. I am transit dependent. I live in low income housing. From here where I live, my apartment complex to my university, it takes me over 2 hours to get to my school. And when people drive from here, it takes 15 minutes. Also, low-income housing here, when I say low-income housing, people probably thinking, oh yeah, you have accessible bus stop around me, but it's not, that is not true, because I have to walk 10 to 12 minutes on busy streets and narrow sidewalk to get to the bus. And from there, I catch 3 different buses to get to my school. And if I miss one of those buses, I get to my school actually like 3 hours or something. It's really struggle. And I grew up in Ridgefield, Washington. Ridgefield, Washington is a little bit north side of Vancouver, Washington, where I grew up. I did not have any public transportation in my area where I grew up, and I struggled so much. I did not have any fun stuff to do, and my mom is single, and none of my family drives beside my mom, and she works, so she can't drive me, and I didn't have any public transportation around my area, so I didn't go anywhere, hang out with my friends, shopping, or hang out, or like a party or anything like that. And finally, I moved out from my mom's house, and I live here in Vancouver, low income housing, and I still struggle because people who live in low income housing and people who are disabled, low income people who use transportation more, but we don't have accessible transportation route around here in my area. I have to walk 12 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes from my apartment. It takes me 10 to 12 minutes if it's a nice day. If it's rainy or snow, it takes me longer because I have to focus crossing busy streets in traffic in the rain, even though I'm getting wet, because I have to navigate through snow with my cane and finding sidewalk, slowly walking. It takes me over 20 minutes to walk from my place to the bus. And I don't get places faster, and I don't, like other people here mentioned, if my class starts 9 a.m., I have to leave a house like 5 a.m. or something. And sometimes I get late to my class. And it affects me a lot emotionally. And kind of keeps me home a lot because I depend on transit. And I can't leave my house when I have to think about how long I have to walk, how long it takes me to get to places like a grocery shopping, schools, and hang out with friends. It's just not so much fun for me to travel that long to get places. And by driving 10 minutes takes me hour, or like by driving 20 minutes takes me over 2 hours. And it's very struggle for me here. And I need our elected officials and transit departments to give us, please, closest bus stop, especially low income housings like here, and make transportation frequent, because if not frequent, I have some buses here run once an hour. When I miss my bus, I sit at bus stop entire hour waiting for a bus in the rain, in the snow, in the sun, and I wish I have a ride right here. And listening to people who driving by me, I saying, "You lucky." I wish I could drive too. And that is my struggle. Thank you so much for listening.
Well, thank you so much, Abby, for sharing. And the real impacts of not having that access to to reliable transportation, and regarding education. And I really appreciate too making the ask specifically to elected officials and to policymakers to make that change. Next, I'm going to introduce Jermaine, and would love to hear from you and hear more, your story and regarding transportation.
Hi, everyone. So glad to be here. My name is Jermaine Mason, hailing from Port Orchard, Washington. I am here to read you guys a story. Oh, also a co-coordinator for the Washington People's Party. And I'm so happy to be here to tell this. I'm going to read you guys a story, an article I actually posted in our local paper. Good afternoon. My name is Jermaine Mason. I'm the state coordinator in the Movement for a People's Party here in Washington State. Haven't heard of us yet? Give it a minute. I have MS and depend on my scooter to get around the majority of the time. January 25th, for example, I had an appointment at the Silverdale St. Michael Hospital. When I arrived, I was informed that my appointment had been canceled due to COVID concerns. My pickup time was in 2.5 hours at the Kitsap Mall, so I figured I'd have an extra hour to go window shopping. I started traveling on the sidewalk like everyone else, using a handicap ramp to gain access to the sidewalk, which gave me a false sense of security in hindsight. The sidewalk was extra bumpy due to cracks and erosion from not being maintained properly in who knows how long, but doable it was. Until I reached the mall, that is. When I tried to transfer from the sidewalk to the road to cross the street, the ramp had eroded about a 3-inch gap between the sidewalk and the road. My scooter is not an off-road vehicle, so I was stuck waving my arm in traffic for someone to help. Very embarrassing. Finally, a helpful citizen and his son lifted me to safety. If it wasn't for them, who knows how long I would have been stuck. I've been in similar situations like this multiple times over the last 10 years. So cutting funds to the transportation budget or not extending that budget further would mean more of the same for the disabled community. Please hear your disabled constituents' cries for help. We are relying on you to be the voices we elected you to be. Respectfully, me, myself, and I. Thank you, and I yield my time.
Thank you so much, Jermaine. That was, thank you, because you just everything that you're bringing up so much, and, you know, making that specific ask to our policymakers of having this investment for our disabled communities, for our low-income communities, right? For our communities to have access. And so I really appreciate you also sharing that. Thank you so much. Let me introduce then Crystal as our last speaker today. And as a reminder, if people have questions, feel free to start putting them in. We'll still be here though, of course. So, but if you're starting to think of questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Crystal would love to hear from you, where you're calling from, and you know why this issue is important to you.
Hi, my name is Crystal Monteros. I am in Tacoma, Washington. I've lived here, I want to say since like 2005. And I am a commissioner now for the Tacoma Area Commission on Disabilities. So I'm a strong advocate for all of us over here. I'm very passionate about transportation. I've been taken, I was born in a wheelchair, I'll say that. So I've used a wheelchair all my life. But I've been taking public transportation since probably 7th, 8th grade. It started in California, and then I was taking public transportation when I lived in Colorado, and I was taking public transportation once I moved over here. So that being said, I've seen the different areas, like how other people have talked about on here. I've seen the different areas and how, you know, it's just different, the accessibility wise. Here in Washington State specifically, I've noticed in Tacoma, there's certain parts of Tacoma alone that, like, literally one side of the city can be more accessible than the other side of the city. You know, like, it's not even the whole city is accessible, but one side is more accessible than the other. I've had certain situations where, like, there was one, all I wanted to do was go to Kmart. And you know, you can put in on the website, like, what address you want to go to, it'll tell you the route and all that. I did that. I clicked accessible. It claimed it was accessible. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Kmart today. I did that. And it was my first time going. And in their eyes, it was accessible. But I got there and Kmart was across the street. But their version of accessible was, I got off the bus and there was concrete at the bus stop. Now, as soon as I turned, it turned straight to like loose gravel for the sidewalk that my front wheels just like totally dug into. Now, I was across the street from Kmart and I couldn't get to the crosswalk to cross the street to get to Kmart. And like, I had just taken, like how multiple people have already said, I had just taken 3 buses to get there. And I ended up having to actually call my sister to come get me, simply to take me across the street, because I couldn't get through all that gravel and everything to cross the street after taking all those buses. Like, it's little stories like that where it's like, we need to improve, like, not only public transportation, but all the sidewalks and infrastructure and everything. I've been saying, because of that one story and multiple other ones that I have, that I personally don't think that public transportation needs to like just improve and then infrastructure needs to improve, but I think they need to start working together personally, because it's like, what's the point in saying that, like, okay, this bus stop is accessible if they don't bother to see if the sidewalk is accessible or if there's a crosswalk there in order for you to reach everything around there, you know, like, but to me, they need to start working together. So that's the one thing that I've been saying that we need to start advocating for, not just in my city, but everywhere, you know. And I mean, that's when I had that story happen, it wasn't even like raining or anything. I can just imagine how it would be if it was raining. I have had certain situations where I was like stuck at the bus stop and it started like hailing and stuff on me, and you know, like, it wasn't even raining, it was hailing. So yeah, I think that would be a good thing that we need to start doing, is having both those groups, I guess, work together. So, but that would be what I have to say.
Thank you so much, Crystal. You know, I really love that you bring up to what accessibility means to people. and really getting that message across to when somebody says, oh yeah, that's accessible, and why it's so important. I mean, I think that's, you know, for everybody here, and, you know, that's what's front and center. It is like, that's why these solutions need to be community led, right? It needs to be by our communities that understand what that really means. So I appreciate in you bringing that up, just really highlights that so much. You know, and again, if people are having questions, it seems like there is a question from the audience, and I want to go there first, and then I have another question for everybody, but definitely sounds like Joe would like to ask a question. Would love to introduce yourself and hear, you know, your question.
Thank you for having me today. I'm Joe Kunzler. I take transit to get around a lot, especially to public meetings to advocate for better transit. Very appreciative of the work Front and Center is doing. It was my honor to donate pictures to one of your recent reports, and also really appreciate all Disability Mobility Initiative is doing to represent us in Olympia. Very, very grateful. However, I wonder what the reaction is to the, you know, Sound Transit attempting to lobby to reinsert itself into the WSD DOT mobility grants that are local transits like King County Metro, Skagit Transit, Community Transit, Evertransit, just for example, rely on. And those little transits do not have the revenue tools that Sound Transit has, and yet desperately need that grant money. Also, this decision by Sound Transit was done outside of a public meeting with public comment. I'm just adding that there, but I want to get back the microphone and wait for your response. Thank you.
Like I want to open it up if anybody has any comments on that, and has any thoughts on Joe's question in regards to Sound Transit.
Joe, this is Paulo. Thanks so much for bringing that up. I'm not familiar with the details of that, but I think that at the core, the question is how do we get more money for transit all across the spectrum, from the local transit agencies to the big behemoths like Sound Transit, and we really need to make a whole new pie, not just make the pie bigger, so that we can fund all of these projects. And it's sad to think that we are, you know, pitted against each other, where one agency is potentially taking money that might go to local improvements like what we're talking about here. Thanks for bringing that up.
And I'll say, you know, I definitely heard from a few speakers, and really everybody in a way, this need for infrastructure, you know, hearing everybody's story, and specifically, you know, through that, just this need for infrastructure and investment. You know, Jaime, I know you specifically called out, you know, that infrastructure is crumbling. You know, Paul mentioning in rural communities, and what I appreciate too is everybody coming from different parts of the state and yet seeing this statewide need, right, for this investment. And I wonder if anybody, you know, your thoughts on that, or in terms of, you know, what do elected officials need to hear about from that statewide perspective, that it's not just in one place. We're seeing this need for infrastructure. Any conversations you've been in, or, you know, what need do you see there specifically?
Okay, well, me personally, I would like to be included in conversations like that with elected officials. Like, it feels like we are ignored or cast away almost. And like I said, I just feel we need more representation and be at those tables and at those meetings where decisions are being made to distribute all that money and where it goes to. So I think a seat at the table is very important. And I know it's a kind of cliche thing to say nowadays, but representation is very important, and to be included is very important in my opinion.
Yeah. I wonder if others have also been seeing this need to, you know, to have that seat at the table, right? To be talking to elected officials and to have more of that community voice. You know, what have been ways that you've seen that that need come out? And oh, let me. I think Paul, can we?
Yeah, hello again. I was fortunate enough to participate in the city of Yakima's. This was several years ago. The city of Yakima did their, I don't know if it's a biannual, but when they review their routes and make changes. So I caught wind of it through one of our local civic organizations. This was prior to my career now, and was able to go to the city meetings to see what civic entities actually were there. It was unfortunate to see that there were maybe 8 to 12 people from the community there, most of them representing 1 to 2 handicapped organizations. So now that I'm into community outreach, I see the lack of information either from the public entity side of the timing that allows the community to participate. You know, at what level does the city actually engage civic organizations? I don't know, that most of them don't have like a PR program, but in the end, what it came down to was a financial decision, that everything was bound by how much money they were getting, whether they were applying for grants. And that's where I realized that from a larger perspective, the community has to drive the city to apply for grants, but then they also have to look at the larger regional and the larger state level of funding. And that's where I think our organizations that do link across the state can make that huge, that increases our energy and communication of the issue. It also increases our energy to contact our local officials that creates power in legislature. So through that, that's something that we encourage to build and find the issues that are pertinent and then really engage through our community the best that we can. That's what I do today. And that's really what I'm seeing is most effective. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing about that. Jermaine, I think you also, I see your hand up, wanted to add to this.
Yeah, so this was more of a question. I'm kind of a straight shooter. So from this situation, how soon could the disabled community see this come to fruition for something that we need so bad? I don't know who would really answer that question, but we've had 5 speakers on this call screaming how bad, well, not screaming, but voicing how bad. I mean, we're in dire straits out here. We can't get across the street to get to a bus stop. And I'm just wondering, like, with this conversation and opening up and telling you guys how we feel and what we're going through. Is there like a time frame and how long we could see the budget increase, or so yeah, and I yield the floor.
So that's a pretty good segue. Thank you so much, Jermaine, for bringing that up. I want to invite Anna from Disability Rights Washington and Joe is clapping her on to join me in talking about where we are with the policies. So if you haven't seen it, I think you should check out a post that we did at Front and Centered at our blog that kind of captures what we heard from our members as we did a listening session from around the state. And Oh, lost audio. Can you not hear me? Can you hear me, Lillian? People can hear me? Okay. I think Alejandra lost her audio. But the sort of, if I had to a way to capture what all of these stories really point to, is that for some reason, and we can talk about that as well, our transportation system acts as if only certain people deserve dignity when they move around the state, when they move around to throughout their lives. And the people that deserve dignity are the people that are able to drive, can afford to drive, are old enough to drive. And we can, all of these stories ultimately have a starting point in policy. And the policy really seems to say, I mean, honestly, it says this, that there is a statewide responsibility to provide reliable, safe, dignified transportation for people who drive. When it comes to transit, when it comes to an actual sidewalk, it is not the state's responsibility, right? The actual sidewalk, and Anna talks a lot about this and is really clear when we talk about this. It's the property owner's responsibility to fix that sidewalk if it's broken. It's crazy. It doesn't make any sense, right? And the other thing that I think is really important for us to center in this discussion when it comes to our really key focus also at Front and Centered is that transportation is 40% of our climate change emissions here in Washington State. So it's this system that we've built that doesn't provide dignity for very many people consistently also is so dirty, and it's contributing to something that is going to affect that is affecting all of us today. And part of those climate change emissions are really linked to pollution that causes asthma, that causes people to miss work, to miss school, to have lifelong health issues. And particularly Black, brown, and disabled people suffer more of those impacts. So given all of that, what we're working with in partnership with Anna and the Disability Rights Washington folks is for us to say, time out. We really need to change the way that we're doing our transportation funding, to change the way that we view who deserves dignity and who doesn't deserve dignity. So I'm going to share my screen for 1 second, and then I'm going to invite Anna to preach with me. So this is from our report. This is, I'm going to scroll to the bottom. This is the Front and Centered blog post that then mentions the listening sessions that we did with many of your groups. And we call it a victory lap because what we want to say there is, hey, we've built all the roads that we will need for decades into the future. Let's call that project done. Victory, mission accomplished. But we don't have, as all of your stories tell us, we don't have even the basics. So when Jermaine talks about just getting across that street, and can't do it reliably because it's nobody's job to make sure that that is maintained and that sidewalk is safe, that is a job that's not done. It's unfinished work. And so right now there are proposals in Olympia that raise the gas tax and that create new sources of revenue for transportation. However, we have a big criticism of the way that those are done because they go primarily to building more roads. And a little bit of that money goes to important environmental priorities like creating the fish ladder so fish migration can continue. But the overwhelming, so if you see here, the red is, these are 2 transportation packages that are proposed. The red is for roads. The green is for everything non-auto, including, as Paul was saying, Paul, you mentioned, the jurisdictions need to go and ask and make grant funding. It's crazy. If cities want to do right by these issues that we're talking about, you have to go on bended knee and beg for money to be able to do these projects, right? They don't come standard. That's it. The sort of piece of the blog was dignity doesn't come standard. You have to go and you have to beg for it. So I want to share this and then hand it over to Anna. Through a coalition of other advocates called Clean and Just Transportation Coalitions, we've been working to identify, well, what are the needs? When Abby talks about waiting at the bus stop for an hour for the next bus if she misses a bus, that is totally unacceptable, right? That bus frequency is freedom, is the ability to go to the places where you want in a reliable way. And if the bus runs every 10 minutes, if you miss one, it's not a big deal. Abby can wait for 10 minutes. But if it comes once an hour, that's limiting to people's ability to go the places that they need. And so the green bars here are the transit service needs that we see in Washington State, $15 billion. Both of these packages that we looked at today, they either offer a tiny little bit or a little bit over 16 years. So what you see in this, in transit capital, transit affordability, and bike walk infrastructure, what you see in these proposals that are there, they still don't even come close to changing the paradigm of how we do this. And they will not, and I promise I will shut up. And Jermaine, to answer your question, these will not make it so that we can address these issues in a way that meets our needs across the state. So what we need to work on together is how do we join our voices so that we can say we need to get to at least 50% of the green bar in 5 years and 100% of the green bar in 10 years, right? So Anna, I want to get off the soapbox and hand it to you.
Sure. Thanks, Paulo. I think that's a wonderful analysis, and really also everyone, thank you for sharing your stories. I know it's a little, it's hard to put yourself out there in your own struggle out there, and especially those of us with disabilities, it's often something that we're told to be ashamed of, right? And that we're not supposed to make a big deal about. We're supposed to just sort of go along with what's easy for other people. And I think to go back to Jimin's question, like, I think personally what's going to make a difference here is if we start doing more of this, if we start doing more of this organizing work where we're coming together and we're being visible and we're sharing our stories and we're sharing our needs, because they're real and they're valid. And frankly, people who can't and don't drive make up 1/4 of our state's population. At least, right? Even if we weren't such a large group of folks, we still have valid access needs, and those access needs should be met. And we can meet them. We're also an incredibly wealthy state. There is the resources here to make the investments we need. They're just not getting prioritized in the way that our communities are asking for. And so I'm excited to be doing this work and organizing with all of you, so we can begin to say, hey, wait a second, the way that things have been going for the last 60 or 100 years, and even longer, frankly, that isn't working for us anymore. We really have to think about how we can build the system of the future that's going to work better for our communities, and how we get there is going to be different. It's going to be a change. It's not going to be throwing a few $100,000 at pedestrian projects over the next 16 years. That's not enough. We need more, and we're going to demand more. So that's all I have to say. And I'm really just so excited and so happy that everyone's had a chance to have their voices heard. And I think for many folks who are working with us in our Storymap work, this is the first step towards towards doing this kind of activism, and it's really great. I'm so excited about it.
Thanks, Anna. And Lillian, I think we can open it up for people to ask questions using their mics, I think.
Yeah, people have questions.
I guess, Melina, we would have to unmute everybody. I don't know how to do that.
Sure. So what I'm going to do, hi everyone, I'm on the back end. I am going to essentially try to, it'll give you the ability to unmute yourselves. So now, earlier you were not able to, but now you can unmute yourselves, if I'm not mistaken. And if not, then raise your hand. If you're having any issues, raise your hand, and we'll make sure to call out your name.
I'll be brief. I hope Anna and Paulo heard my clap, could at least see me clapping and cheering, because I enjoyed every single word both Paulo and Anna said. It's time we told the truth as state legislature that the state legislative processes are fundamentally broken. We have an Olympia filibuster where bills have to pass through by a certain cutoff or they're dead, regardless of their merits. Or can be killed by other bills, extracting amendment after amendment after amendment, and then killing those good bills, like the bill to get local Seattle funding for sound transit to complete ST free. As you can see, I'm all about protecting transit funding. And I just want to applaud you both, Anna and Paulo, and thank you so much for all you do. Bravo, nicely done.
No. Thank you guys. This is amazing. So we went to visit Crystal at a bus stop across the street from our house and did a media event there, and a city council person came. Crystal, do you want to tell the story about that?
I most definitely can. I was very excited to have you guys here. Thank you guys for doing that. Like I said, I'm from Tacoma. Well, not from, I live in Tacoma. This area gets hardly any attention whatsoever. Like, I know you guys saw the new curb cuts that are like on the main crosswalk. Those new curb cuts were done basically because I fought for it when I moved here. It wasn't done when I got here, and I live right there on the corner. But basically, as a commissioner, I was basically fighting the city, like, I'm not going to move into these apartments and not be able to go across the street to go get myself a soda. Like, I straight took it to the city, and within probably a 3-week time period, maybe, they didn't have it completely done like how it looks now, but they at least had a little bit of a decent ramp that I can get down to cross the street until they can get to it the way that they did, because that was the only fair thing. But they've slowly worked on the area over time. But now I'm just stuck on that other section that we were just, working on the other day. But it's sad that these areas go overlooked, though, because the one thing that I keep on saying is the area that I live in specifically is a red line community. Like, everybody within Tacoma is going to say that it's a red line community. And that's one thing that I stand for, and I keep on saying that it's going to be the hardest to get funding for this area because it's a red line community, in my opinion. And a lot of people, even the council member that was here, he didn't even notice until he came here. He was telling me he didn't even notice that there was no sidewalk right there and that there was no curb cuts right there. And he's over this area, and he had told me that when he was at the event, he had told me that he's seen me pushing myself down the street before when he was driving down, but I was telling him that's because there's sidewalk over there. There's no sidewalk over here, so I can't push myself over here. And it's crazy that a lot of the elected officials, I guess, don't even realize what you know, the areas are about until we actually speak up and say something. But I thought it was a great event though. Thank you guys for coming.
This is Anna. We're going to be heading to Vancouver next week to visit Abby, so, and some other folks down there. So
Oh,
stay
yeah.
tuned.
I'm looking forward to talk about some sidewalks and things like that in Vancouver, the place we're going. But I was going to say something about sidewalks and curb cuts and no sidewalk streets here in my area too. Sometimes I think about people, because here in low-income housing we have a lot of elderly people, a lot of disabled people, and a lot of people who uses wheelchair. But when I go to bus for like 10 to 12-minute walk to get to the bus, how skinny, how narrow the sidewalk makes me think, like, how the people who use a wheelchair get around here? Like, I use a cane, I can struggle through it, but like it's kind of sad, and it's downhill, and it's very skinny sidewalk, and it's not even a smooth sidewalk. And I can feel struggle. Everybody's struggling, not only how far bus stop, but like how hard sidewalks are to navigate.
Paul Tabayoyon shared some pictures that kind of show the state of sidewalks near where he lives, Abby, and I'm sharing the screen of the pictures that Paul sent me. And Paul, you can tell the story here.
Yeah, if you go up one slide, this is the bus stop is actually just around the corner to the left of the blue car, but this is after going over a hill. And then, as you had mentioned, the gravel on the sides. This is a very busy street, even though it doesn't appear here. I've had people swerve at me, honk at me, even with my cane. But the day I had my Indian walking stick, everybody waved. So that was like, I used it religiously after that, and you would not believe the differences. But if go ahead and go to the next slide. This stop is the one that's actually closest to my house, but takes longest to get to college. So this stop here, it would roughly send me on about a 45-minute to an hour journey, depending on weather, to the college. And you can see the sign, there is no sidewalk at all. The sidewalk actually ends one block behind me. And go to the next slide. And you can see that I took a closer shot, and then go to the next slide. That's where the original bus stop was. So after the meetings and everything that I was participating in, they actually moved it farther from my house. But I also realized that there was a living establishment, like a women's housing establishment, that swayed the decision to actually eliminate a closer bus stop and move another one farther to more meet their needs. But this is a perfect example in Yakima where we have so many areas that don't have access to the bus stop. If there's snow, we get a lot of snow in Yakima sometimes. You don't even have a place to stand for the bus stop, nor let alone access it. So that's one of the more common issues, and that's why I appreciate you talking about that, Paulo, about how the transportation system doesn't include infrastructure and how badly we as the community need to involve our community officials, whether it be through public announcements, city meetings, I found is highly effective, but then engaging our communities together. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Wow, thanks so much. Lillian, back to you.
No, just thank you so much. I mean, I think this is, it feels like we could keep talking together. And, I appreciate so much everybody sharing, thank you so much. Paul, Alejandra, Jaime, Abby, Jamin, Crystal, because I just hear so much collective action that we need to be taking, and we need to be holding, right, like elected officials accountable. And you know, we've got our leadership too of having people who build this into the policies, that we're not just waiting for to not be included, but really pushing together to make sure that, you know, I just heard so much in terms of, it's not enough to just have a policy that ignores an entire community, right? And we need to be taking that action together to say that, you know, it's, and we know the intersection around like our own health and around, you know, having climate justice and having, you know, transportation justice. So I'm really so appreciative for everybody's leadership here, and making that call to action. I know this is just, you know, this is one piece and not an end conversation at all. And you know, how do we take that action together and make sure, you know, beyond a bill cutoff, right? Like we're looking at beyond and having a lot of what you all are doing locally. How do we do it on a statewide level? How do we make sure that this infrastructure is there and the investment? Because it's unacceptable where it is. So I'm just so appreciative. I mean, if anybody, you know, if any of the speakers have any other last words, yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks, everybody. I just shared a link that Kelsey from the Clean and Just Transportation Alliance shared, and there are great calls to action there, and we've been working with them throughout this whole time. So I just want to thank everybody again for joining, and maybe Kelsey, do you want to give a little plug about actions that are available there?
Yeah, this is just our most recent action. It's just an email template. It makes it easy for you to write into your local representatives and senator. And there is a kind of draft message in there, but please feel free to share your own story or your own priorities. It just isn't a way for you to easily connect with your elected official. And I also want to echo all the appreciation for everyone coming together here and sharing your experiences and putting your voices together. It's really impactful. So thank you. And thanks, Paolo and Anna and everyone for putting this together.
All right, to be continued. Thanks for hosting, Liliana. That was great.
Thank you so much, everyone.
One day soon, everybody in person.
Thank you.